And we're live. Hey everyone. Today I'm speaking with Ghada, and we're going to be talking about ethnic math frameworks, equitable math, anti-racist math, and basically bigotry of low expectations. Hey Ghada, thanks for coming on.
Hello.
So a wonderful way to spend a Saturday afternoon, isn't it?
Well, I'm going to do the other super capitalistic white thing that a lot of Americans do, which is work on a weekend. So might as well.
Yeah, might as well. There you go. So the math framework.
The math framework, and the funny thing is that this was actually written by educators that teach math, which is something that really scares me. Like, how on earth have these people been given the opportunity to teach math when this is how they view math?
Okay, but that's the thing, right? Like, that's the core of this issue. It's when it comes down, when the curriculum comes down to the teachers, they're starting to teach it, but the colleges of education got infected with this stuff back in the mid 80s. So, I mean, it wasn't like, critical race theory and intersectionality weren't around then, but postcolonialism was, and critical theory and postmodernism was. And there's this guy, Paulo Fiore, he's from Brazil. Like, you can watch videos of him talking about this. And so the colleges of education are now teaching people to be activists, not teachers. And so, okay, the best way I can describe it is like, okay, if I'm trying to bring it down, like if you put it in an Islamic sense, so like the ijtihad,
yes,
where you look internally and you perfect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole point of this is to find the racism within yourself, get rid of it, and then you can take on everything else, because you have to deal with your racism first. So, and then when it gets into an organization, it's look at the racism within the organization. So it thinks like that's basically the mentality of it. So they're saying, okay, and then you take like the view of someone like Ibram Kendi. So disparity means discrimination and racism. So, okay, black and brown kids, or black kids, I guess, because South Asians and East Asians do fairly well in math. Okay, they're not doing well in math. There's a disparity. It must be racism in the teaching. And so that's where you get this from. And so it's not like, I was speaking to someone, and I think it was in New York. So like the chair of the Department of Education or something was coming on. It was on the news, and they were talking about something like 30% of the people coming out teaching math couldn't do fractions. So 30% of the people teaching the math couldn't figure out what the fraction 30% was.
Oh, God. So the problem is not that it's racism. It's that the way math is taught in schools here is bad. And you can see it in the way this is kind of put together. They're already assuming from the very get-go that if your first language isn't English, if you're Latino, or if you're Black, that you already have a disadvantage, which in its own is so they start off with, don't come in thinking that they're going to be bad at math, but they're also writing this whole document saying that they're going to be bad at math. Do you see how the paradoxical thinking it's?
Oh yeah. It's all like that. It's all a bunch of, I mean, it's in everything.
It's not. Yeah. It's they're saying that the culture is toxic and we need to get better at it. And when it comes to learning, yet they already are sending this information with language like, these are the students that are going to be multilingual, that are Black, and that are brown and Latino. They won't be good at math, and this is why. And because it just doesn't understand. It's just not. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense, especially when it comes to math, because math, like they also mentioned, that it is complex, but it also is linear. When people, one of the things that they mention here in the Oregon Equitable Math document is that, don't teach linearly, or the aspect that you have to take, like an algebra 1 before you go to algebra 2, or you have to master something before going on to the next level. That is also white supremacy. But you have to build from, that's just common sense. If you're going to be able to do, let's say, equations, you first have to learn how to multiply and add. And if you're going to be doing, let's say, complex integrals, you still have to know how to do regular, equations in algebra. It just doesn't make any sense that you would skip that and just go up to the second step. You have to go at it linearly.
No,
It's
but I
this
mean,
the way that it's taught with methods. You have to build the building blocks, which is why in elementary school you start off with addition and subtraction, and then you go on to get multiplication and division, and so on until you build the blocks in order to get to finally algebra and pre-calculus and then calculus.
but I mean, they also like focusing on getting the right answer, and then if you go a little bit further down, they talk about how showing your work, asking people to show their work is racist.
Yes.
Right. So when I got into like algebra and we were doing like, binomials or quadratics and things like that, let's say the question was worth 10, 6 marks out of 10 would be for getting the right answer. The other 4 would be for showing your work. So, I mean, that is a way to look at the student's thinking. So like if I do my quadratic and I go through all the steps, but I make a mistake in my arithmetic, at least I know the concepts and I get credit for that.
That is true.
And
yes.
they're saying, if you focus on the right answer, that's racist. And if you ask them to show their work, that's racist. So what exactly are you grading the students on?
From what they keep saying is that they keep, there's like something at the end of every chapter where ask the student question, what did they learn today? I was like, well, okay, but isn't also them giving you the right answer or a response considered racist too? Like it seems that there's no very clear answer as how you're going to be grading these students. And another thing I noticed, like with, okay, so you think that the focus on getting the right answer is incorrect, right? And you want to know how the student is thinking, and you have to show. So instead of writing it down, there is a part where she asks, like, can you please show me how to do this? Is that how they want it to be phrased? Like, I am not the one teaching you, you teach me.
See, like that's, I don't know. Part of this is a lot of it is language games. So if you, I mean, that could be part of it. I don't know, but that's the same thing as a teacher getting you to get up on the blackboard and doing the example, right?
Yeah.
But when a teacher gives you homework or when a teacher gives you a test and they say, do this problem, that's the teacher saying, show me how to do this problem. It's not, so.
That is true.
But again, like if you look at some of this stuff and if you go back to where some of it's coming from. So Seattle did the same thing in 2019. New York, the state had ethnic math or ethnic education framework or culturally adaptive framework, something like that, since 2018. New York City has been talking about if Black and brown kids come in late, be culturally sensitive and don't mark them wrong, don't penalize them. So this is all based off a way of thinking that says that, basically, okay, the Smithsonian Museum, African American History Museum had it, then the Smithsonian took it down from their website, but it's still, the information there, the graphics gone, where it's objectivity, professionalism, punctuality, worship of the written word, individualism. These are all things that are part of white supremacy. So if you read this math curriculum at the very start of it, they say straight out that while primarily for math educators, this text advocates for a collective approach to dismantling white supremacy.
Yes.
This school-wide approach. So the administrators are being taught this.
And they're being encouraged to not have everybody do individual work. And that's one of the things that they keep saying. But also not to they're saying maybe let them do things in groups, but only they get to choose the groups, but you don't get to choose those groups for them, because they don't want the teacher's bias of putting a good student with a bad student so they can learn from each other, let's say, which is one of the biggest things, in my opinion. And what helped a lot of the girls when I went to school, because we were sometimes asked to be divided into groups, but the teacher who it has more aptitude for math and who doesn't, or who understands the concept better than another one, and then they would put them together so they could learn from each other, which which is a really good method of teaching. But if you put two students that just want to talk with each other together, I mean, come on, if you were 11 and you're asked like, okay, now go into groups and try to figure out a way to solve this problem, but you're not going to divide them into groups, they're just going to go with their friend and nobody's going to answer anything, except maybe the people that find it really enjoy math and actually want to do it. But is that also considered racism? If I look at it this way, is that white supremacy?
Okay, but then you're going to say because the teacher's using their biases. But let's say you leave it up to the students, and the students all divide themselves up the way they want. If that works out, again, to show that black and brown kids aren't doing well, then it's the kids themselves are racist. So now the teacher has to lead them to be anti-racist. No, it's okay. Like, okay, but that's no, okay, but that's the. I mean, D'Angelo said it best and the most clearly when she said it. It's like, it's not that, did racism occur? It's how did racism manifest? So that's in any situation. So you go into it thinking that racism is already manifested. So anything that happens, there is a power play and there is racism, and it's guaranteed.
But this would affect students in a very, very negative way. Because even if, let's say, a black student, a brown student, a student from a different culture, but and English isn't their first language, which is bullshit. Math travels across all languages. That's the one thing about math that is so beautiful, is that it's not a cultural barrier. It's not a language barrier. Everybody understands it because it's just numbers. If you can reduce it to numbers, understood. Which is
okay, that's the message. That's the message we send out to space. Their messages in math.
Yes, because it's the one thing that is it's an easier. It crosses borders. If you know math, it doesn't matter. Like I studied it in Arabic, right? And I came to America to study engineering, and I still was able to understand it and go through it, because math is not a white thing. It's not a European thing. Some of the best mathematicians came from India and from the Middle East. It's a well-known thing. It's okay, but like take for example this part. Teach students mathematicians of color, which is okay, fine. Go ahead and do that. We learned that back in Saudi, but it's more because of Islamic Muslim stuff than it is because of racism and whatever. But then this part that really gets me: give rightful credit to the discovery of mathematical concepts of color. Who cares who discovered what? We have it. It can be proven. Many people have been able to prove it. Why on earth are we? It doesn't really matter. Whoever wrote it can claim it, and it's okay. And usually in history, we know who did this, but we still call it like the Pythagorean theorem, for example. Oh, but Pythagoras was the first one who was able to come up with it. Like, no, it was used before, but he was the one that wrote it and showed the proof for it.
Yeah, it's the same thing now. They want to get rid of Newtonian physics because it's
Goodness.
Okay.
No, I was joking about this yesterday.
Okay, sorry. I'm not saying they want to get rid of Newtonian physics. They said to ascribe it to Newton, like we shouldn't call it Newton, like Newton's first law and like Newton's laws of motion. It's like, yeah, okay, they were there, but he wrote them down. He came up with the formulas. He showed you how to calculate them. So it's Newtonian physics. I mean, Jesus Christ.
What do they want to call it?
I don't know. Like, classical physics, maybe. I have no idea, but maybe. But
it is called that. It's called mechanics.
Yeah.
It's called, statics. It's called mechanical physics or whatever. It has other names. It has classical physics, I guess. But what are we going to change ohm again as well?
Yeah, but I mean, there's everything like ohm, watt, volt. Like, isn't ampere also named after someone? Like, I mean, come on, like,
it's constant.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious! Schrodinger's cat.
Boyle's law. Like, no, but I mean, okay, that's the thing. And then the other side of it, okay, algebra. It's an Arabic word.
Yeah.
Algorithm. Jesus Christ, we use Arabic numerals, even though the Arabs stole them from India. But
I know, but it's like we know this stuff. And okay, fine, you get to teach this to students, but how is that dismantling racism when you're just giving it? When it comes to math, it's like, okay, it's fun to understand the history of math, but it's also important to get the mathematical knowledge out of it, and it is important as well because math can be applied and is applied into everyday life, correct? And they keep mentioning to give real life examples and to ask students to give real life examples. So when you do that, when you ask students to give real life examples of where you can use math, how are you also not concentrating on getting the right answer? Because when you do not get the right answer in real life, disasters happen.
No, but that's it too. But like you're okay. So like part of this is, I mean, the whole education system. So if you want to do real life, practical examples of math, a lot of things that they took out of high schools in both Canada and the States. So, I'm sure some schools still have woodshop and things like that, or home ec classes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying woodshop for boys, home ec for girls, like whatever, just whoever wants to take it. But a home ec class, you're making a recipe. Like, okay, so you need half a cup of this. You need, like, you can show math. You can, like, okay, this is a recipe for 4 people. We want you to make it for 12. So you got to figure out the ratios. You got to figure all that out. You're working with wood. You're working with measurements and angles and cuts. Like, there's math is applicable. I mean, there's ways to show it, but.
And baking. Let's go to baking. Baking is across all cultures, correct? Yep. Every culture has their own types of breads, their own types of baked goods, and almost all of them do it in certain ratios that are also math. You're like, okay, when when you're making something, and you see that a lot in like really old recipes that I get like from grandmothers and everything. It's like, okay, you put flour and then, but make sure that the flour is twice as much as the water. You put this much for this many people. Like when they give you ratios, especially my grandmother when she's talking about how to make rice for a lot of people. Because one time I asked her that. She's like, okay, so you say everybody will eat about a cup of rice. So multiply that by the number of people that you're in, and then you have the number of cups for rice. And that's my illiterate grandmother.
No, but everyone did this. I mean,
math is everywhere, and we can show this very easily. And we can also show how disasters can happen very easily. If you give them the wrong ratios, you give two groups, one with the right ratios for baking a cake and one with bad ratios for baking a cake. You can see which one will turn out correct.
Yeah, no, but I mean, okay, so if you look at the standings in the States, again, I can get more information from the States than I can from Canada for some weird reason, but so like for reading and writing, for reading, writing, and math, you have, I think it was 30% of high school graduates were reading at grade level when they graduated. 30%.
That is very, very low.
Okay. A quarter were doing math at grade level when they're graduating. I mean, that's okay. There's something wrong with the way you're teaching reading. There's something wrong with the way you're teaching math. And if you throw this stuff into it, like, okay, math is hard. Math takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work.
It's hard too.
Yeah.
Especially if you have, learning disabilities for both of them, because it's not easy to learn things that especially when you don't have the interest for it.
No, but like, okay, if you are going through the whole curriculum, like learning learning the basics, fine. After up to about third grade, you're okay. But once you start getting past that and you start getting like long division, things like that, it takes a lot of repetition. It takes a lot of learning. Kids don't have the time to have social justice thrown it. Like, you can't cover the whole curriculum and then throw that in there. I mean,
again, that's mentioned there. That wanting to cover all of the curriculum is also white supremacy.
But it's preparing the kids for the future. It's, that's, again, like, this goes back to the colleges of education. There's videos out there of teachers, and they said this, like, oh, we're training our kids to be politically active, blah, 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 instead of more than just the education. If you want kids that are activists, give them a good education.
They need, and this is not going to help in any sort of way. This is not going to help Black or Latin students. This is not going to help students that don't excel in math. And it's just going to create an atmosphere where these students that already feel like math is difficult for them, and I'm not saying that it's just students of color, even though I really hate color. But I'm not just saying that, but I mean, if there is a student in the class that is feeling really bad because they're not doing well in math, and this is what they're being told, then it's just going to make them give up instead of wanting to get better. And it just doesn't seem, to me, they're coming at it from an already looking down on you, like I am superior than you kind of mentality. They are accusing others of it, but they are already showing it because they're thinking that their culture, this European culture, is better. So if you come from a different background, well, we don't know what your ways of doing things are, you exotic people, you. So we are going to sit back and watch as you, like, it's extremely infantilizing and extremely offensive to look at people like that.
No, but it's okay. So again, what's going on in New York City, what's going on in San Francisco, what's going on in West Virginia. So they're getting rid of requirements. Like in New York, they're getting rid of all the elite schools. And this is okay. This was because Asians were, so they started looking at the statistics, okay? In almost all these places, in all these elite schools, Asians were like over 60%. Some places there were as much as 70%.
Mm-hmm.
And that other 30% was made up of, Black kids, Latino kids, and white kids. But they'll say, oh, white and Asian make up 75% of the school. See, it's racism. So they're getting rid of that. And, for a lot of these kids, some of them, they're still coming from poor families. Like, that's their only way out. Like for someone like Glenn Lowry, if he hadn't been spotted and seen as, okay, and now Glenn Lowry was affirmative action and everything, but he was spotted in a school. They said, okay, you're doing well in math. He was given, I think he said he was given a full ride through Harvard.
Nice.
Okay. But now he's a professor of economics. He went through Harvard. He went through MIT. And it was because of one of these programs. So this is, okay, like I shit on critical race theory. I have not much good to say for it. But like, okay, the guy who was arguably the founder, Derek Bell, he had a really good idea. I mean, he took it way too far, but his idea when he said it was, they shouldn't have desegregated the schools. They should have desegregated the education. And I understand that. I mean, he takes it to the point where they said, no, just resegregate everything. But instead of busing kids for, an hour in each direction, fix the schools or the kids are coming from. So like what you're doing now to, like what they were doing at Harvard and they're doing at other Ivy League schools, they would give Black students 250, 300 points on their SATs. They would take points away from Asians and white kids, right?
What, they do that?
Oh yeah, Harvard's being sued for that. The Department of Justice under Biden just dropped the suit against Yale for that, but Harvard's being sued by the students. It's been in the courts for a couple of years now.
Here's my question, and I think this would be a better way, instead of saying that it's racist. It's just me, right? Find out what makes Asian immigrants or children of Asian immigrants do better in math and school.
Okay, but they've already got data like this. So Thomas Sowell's latest book, Charter Schools and Their Enemies, and then I spoke to this guy named Ian Rowe, and Ian's been in education for a while. He's starting up another set of charter schools, but he had schools like this. So Ian's schools were in the South Bronx, and the ones Thomas Sowell talks about were in New York City as well.
Mm-hmm.
In the same building, you have a charter school and you have a district public school.
Okay, in the same building.
Same building, serving the same neighborhood, serving the same population.
Okay.
The district public school will be among the lowest. The charter school will be among the highest as far as grades, exam results, everything. Like students graduating, students going on to college.
Mm-hmm.
In all metrics, it beats it. Like I said, they're among the top. So you have that right there. You're seeing what's done. It's not a question of, so how is that public school now telling, black kids can't do math, so we have to make the math class anti-racist? Whereas a charter school is not doing that. They're actually teaching math, and they're expecting good results from everyone. There's also what was that school, Michaela, in England, and so it's the same kind of thing. I've spoken to Catherine about the woman who started the school, and they had the first set of exam results, like the O levels or whatever, the A levels in England. I'm not quite sure what that is, and so because that was the first class that went all the way through, and graduated, and they were the best in the country. And again, it's a lot of immigrant kids going to that school. So she's like, no, we focus on British history. We focus on, the basics. We focus on the fundamentals. It's, teacher at the front, kids in rows and desks. Some of the things I find them a little too draconian, but the kids seem to like it, whatever. Like there's no talking in between classes. So when you're going from one class to another, it's silence in the hallways. Like, everyone's walking in line. So, but they're just giving kids discipline. And like I said, the kids seem to like it. The kids are doing well. So, but she was getting accused of, again, racism and white supremacy and blah, 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 blah. And you're
children. How is that racist and white supremacist?
Because this stuff is, it's religious. It is 100% religious. And you're taking on whiteness. So when you act, so there was a school in Boston recently, they put it out, and the people, like one of the slides, you can see who made it out. It's called Trust Education or something like that. And they have this online workshop for dismantling white supremacy culture in schools. And it's the same thing. Objectiveness, love of the written word, individualism, perfectionism, being on time, either or thinking. It's all white supremacy. So schools are
have they not seen the hierarchical cultures that a lot of other people come from? It's across all cultures to be like that.
Okay. The word rape was never introduced to First Peoples, Native Americans, until the Europeans came in. Europeans invented rape because they didn't have a word for rape.
Yeah, nobody really had a word for rape back then. Everybody did it and thought it was okay.
Yeah, but that's the thinking. It's
holy shit. No, I can't deal with this. This is just unbelievable. And it's to the point, okay, you read this stuff. You read, how is math manipulated to allow inequality and oppression to persist? Who is doing the oppressing? Who does the oppression protect? Who does this oppression harm? This is brainwashing. Where is there an opportunity to examine systematic oppression? How can math help us understand the impact of? It's almost as if you're reading things like in a North Korean school. This is not. It's almost like they're trying to distract from the actual harms that are there. Are so many problems. This is not the problem. The problem is not that it's racist. It's that you do not have a good education system. It's that when you're economically underprivileged, you do not people in education. Like when you gave the story, the example of the charter school and the public school. The public school is, relying on money from the state, whereas your charter school has its own private, you know,
Actually, that's one thing I found out. Like charter schools are there's district public schools and there's also public charter schools, which do receive money from the government, but they receive less than public schools. So public charter schools. So there's public and private charter schools. There's two kinds.
Okay.
So but these are like the ones that Ian was talking about, and the ones that Thomas Sowell were talking about. They were actually public charter schools. So it was publicly funded. Okay, yes, they were getting some money from private institutions and from donors and this and that as well to get their charter up, but they are publicly funded through government funds, and that's why there's a lot of pushback from the teachers unions and Department of Education and stuff like that to push back on charter schools because they're not within the union system.
But I think that's because they have the freedom to teach, to actually teach instead of having to use whatever public information, or they don't have to use this material. They don't have to brainwash children. When do I feel like I am a mathematician? When do I see people around me as a mathematician? How is this helpful in learning math?
Okay, but again, that's I'll take a silly example. That's why I think it's the National Association of Realtors in Canada said you can no longer use the term master bedroom because there's connotations to slavery. You use primary bedroom. Like that's what this thinking is. That's exactly what this thinking is, and it's just like I was saying, if you lower the things for universities, now you're getting rid of standardized testing. Now you're getting rid of admission standards for these elite high schools.
Okay, but who can afford it?
Okay, but why not fix? But that's what people are saying. Like it's going to screw over the poor. But why not fix the schools? Again, you're doing the same thing that like I said, Derek Bell had a really good point. You should have desegregated this education system. You should have fixed the schools. So this was going a little bit of far afield, but there was a series of during segregation. So after Jim Crow, Booker T. Washington started this series of schools, and this guy named Rosenwald funded them for him. And they were the Rosenwald Schools, and they were Black-only schools, and they are actually doing, if you go back and check, they were doing really well. Like the schools were, the kids were achieving well. When the schools, when Brown versus the Board of Education happened and segregation was deemed illegal, which it's a good thing. So instead of going and saying, okay, you know what, we'll integrate the Rosenwald schools, which were serving the Black communities, which were doing well, and all that, they shut the schools down because they were only Black only, and they bused kids to white schools. So that in itself is racist, right there. Because it
is.
Okay, now there would have been another problem. Like a lot of these schools were in the South. In the poor South, poor white communities didn't have great schools either. I'm sure. Like it's the poor communities didn't have good schools. Period. But would a lot of those poor white parents want to send their kids to a Black school? But if you left the two schools and said you have to be open, you can take whoever you want, and parents being parents, seeing that school doing better, seeing those kids doing better, seeing those kids getting to college, but not their kids, might decide, well, you know what? I'm going to send my kids to a good school. Like it would have overcome. I think that would, doing it that way, I think would have been better than busing. I mean, in some instances, you had no choice but to bus because the school was probably so awful. But busing shouldn't have been your last option. Like to fix the system so it's working.
There is a huge problem when it comes to the education system, and it is a lot of different. There's so many problems with it, like who the people that are in charge of your education are inadequate. The education for educating educators is ineffective. Just like you said, people aren't math teachers can't do simple fractions. A lot of teachers maybe choose this as a last resort. I don't know. I mean, the teachers I know choose teaching because they love it. But maybe there are people that just get into it because they don't. And also the final thing is that it's a lot of it is dependent on funding. And a lot of teachers in schools in America don't get enough funding to be able to teach. They have to bring their own.
Yeah, but that's part of the thing. Like, it's not that. Again, I've been following this. If you look at how much money the public schools get, that's why they're stopping following the money following the student. They want to stop that. I have some issues with that as well. But when you hire an administrator or when you hire an equity officer for $500,000 a year, and you can't put pencil sharpeners in the classrooms, like I've been following. She's a teacher out of Texas, and she started this organization called Support a Teacher. And basically, what they do is teachers make up wish lists on Amazon, and they'll put it on here, and then and then people can donate to those wish lists and buy the stuff off the wish list. But I've looked at some of these. I've filled some of them out. Teachers are asking for pencil sharpeners for their classrooms.
Yeah.
Because don't hire that $500,000 equity officer and put in some goddamn pencil sharpeners. Teachers were getting cleaning supplies, erasers. And I mean, when I was a kid, and this was in the 70s and the 80s, when I was going to grade school and high school and stuff, yeah, there were teachers who would spend out of their own pocket for us, but not like this.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. That's extremely ridiculous. And they don't get paid a lot either.
Yeah, but it's not, like I said, it's not. Oh yeah, fine, money will always help, but if you're not allocating the funds correctly, you're not making. It doesn't matter. I mean, if there's racism in the school, there's black kids aren't learning well enough, so there's racism in the school. We got to fix the racism. It's like that's part of the issue. They're saying we have to fix the racism. Now, maybe there is racism in the school, in one particular school or whatever, but it's not that these kids aren't learning, it's racism. It's not that these kids aren't learning that the education system's wrong. It's the easy answer to say it's racism and fix it. Like, to go back and take a look at the education system, that's a hard issue. I mean, again, this has been in the system for a while, and like now with the K through 12, and that's like since George Floyd, that's been going like wildfire everywhere. I mean, I look at this stuff, and these are woke madrasas.
They are.
If you have a kid going through a madrasa, like I was explaining this to someone, it's like Pakistan went to an Islamic education system in 72. Then in 79, after the Iranian revolution, and then the takeover of Mecca for like 3 or 4 days. I mean, it happened in the same year. Then that was when you had the explosion of Saudi money and Iranian money going out, setting up madrasas and everywhere.
It's called a sahwa, and it's funny because that's like Arabic for woke, like being awoken.
But the madrasa is okay. Not every kid goes out of the madrasa, joins ISIS or Al Qaeda, which thankfully that's so. But enough of them get out that will agree with the Charlie Hebdo shooters.
Yeah,
enough.
You have countries like Saudi Arabia. When I was growing up, taking 5 religion classes, this is very similar to that religion class, by asking us like all sorts of things about the kuffar and the mushrikeen, and it's the same thing.
No, but it's also like it's like Sharia. Everything is seen through the lens of anti-racism. Everything is seen through the lens of intersectionality. Like in Sharia, everything's seen through the lens of Islam. Is it haram or is it halal? That's how it's done, and this is the exact same thing.
And not that could it lead to it. That's not the only thing that they are looking at. It's the same. It's just like in Sharia, some things could lead you to somewhere astray. And they're saying the same thing. Like if it's perceived racist, then it is racist.
But also, like, okay, if you see someone committing a sin, so your brother's drinking alcohol and eating pork and having sex outside of marriage, if you don't report it, you're also committing the sin. You're taking part in it, right? So there's a section with that too. With this too, like they take the word complicity. So that Teen Vogue editor that just got fired. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what a tweet she was, but she said she did it when she was 17. So let's have a little bit of grace here. But no, she's racist. If you don't call her out, you are complicit in that racism. So if you don't call her out and if you don't make a stink about it, you are taking part in sin. I mean, this is such a religious aspect to this. So that kid again, who I don't know if he saved it, because I've been hearing different results, but she was a teenager at 14 years old. She was singing a rap song or something, and she said the N-word.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so as she was graduating high school, she got accepted to, I think, the University of Tennessee. This guy got pissed off at her, found a 4-year-old video of her, sent it to the university. She had her acceptance refused. Because when she was 14, she said the N-word while she was singing along to a rap song or something.
And even if she did mean it, people at 14 are usually idiots.
Yeah.
I was extremely mean when I was 14. I would really hope that the people that I knew when I was 14 don't call my employer and tell them that when I was 14, I called them a bad name.
Yeah, so, like, this stuff, I find it's Jonathan Rauch in his book Kindly Inquisitors, you call this the humanitarian threat to liberal science. And that's exactly what it is. You're tugging on people's good nature. You're asking people to say, okay, don't you want to be anti-racist? Don't you want to be, fight homophobia? Don't you want to fight transphobia? Don't you want to be an ally? All this other, all those little buzzwords. And you're hoping they say yes, because, anti-racism sounds good. Who doesn't want to be anti-racism? And like, they don't look into it. And it's you're working on that, and you're sneaking this stuff in. It's like, and again, like the low expectations. You're thinking so little of black and brown kids that they can't do this, that this wasn't made for them. And then when Asian kids do well, it's like, oh, you've taken on whiteness. And they literally say that.
They're assuming that white people automatically are going to be better at math, which is already a really racist way of looking at things.
Yeah, but there was a conference in Toronto earlier. Okay, what was it? June of last year. Brown complicity and white supremacy. Yeah. Brown complicity and white supremacy. So it was 2 South Asians and 1 Middle Easterner. And it's basically things like, if you succeed, if you do well and you work hard, or if you've been given a job, white people can say, look, we're not racist, we hired a brown person, but that's taking a job away from a black person. So you're actually helping uphold a white supremacist system.
Okay, this is my question. What is the end goal here? In your opinion, what do you think?
They tell you straight out, they want to disrupt and dismantle the white supremacist system. And the only way, okay. Yeah. But the only way to do that is to get rid of whiteness. Okay. So, John McWhorter is writing his book, The Elect, and he's putting out chapters on Substack, and you can read them for free. And I recommend people do that. James Lindsay also wrote a few articles that were really good on this, about how this is a religion. But basically, the way they look at it is, before the Enlightenment created science. That's another thing. Like, science is a white person's invention, even though, whatever, like, we can get into its ridiculousness. But everyone was living together peacefully, the lions wouldn't eat the deers in the Garden of Eden and all that other bullshit, right? Everyone was getting along. Everyone was getting along just fine. Everyone had their own way of knowing. Then white people invented science, and they had the white way of knowing. And because of science and the advancements that science brought, or maybe technically I shouldn't say they invented it, but they used science. They took their way of knowing and all their advancements. They could then use that science to oppress other people and push their way of knowing on other people. And then we came into a white supremacist system. And the only way to do that is to everyone go back to their own ways of knowing and dismantle that white supremacist system. So everyone then has to like go back to, in South Africa, shamans can call down lightning on their enemies, and what the philosophy department at the University of Cape Town said, right? Like, I'm not.
And little girls should get their clits taken out.
Yeah. It's and Hong Kong should be under CCP rule.
And we should never recognize Taiwan as a country.
Yeah, but that's just it. And if
Muslims can continue to beat up their wives.
Yeah, it's their culture. But that's like, and so now what you've got, like, before, you had post-colonialism in the 80s, so like with Edward Said and all that.
Yeah, and that was really, it was bad then, and it's worse, it's bad now.
Okay. But now it's because critical race theory, Bell started writing it, he started writing legal stuff in the early 70s, I guess maybe even the 60s, but his writings that they say form critical race theory came in the mid 70s, but critical race theory, I think the term came out in about the late 80s. So once you got that intersectional framework put on critical race theory, and now it's mixing with post-colonialism. So you have that disrupt text and decolonize science and decolonize, like, I mean, you know, shut down STEM, decolonize STEM. There's always a call to get rid of Moby Dick and Huck Finn and all that stuff. Now in the UK, Cambridge wanted to get rid of Shakespeare, or got rid of Shakespeare. Leicester University in their medieval English department got rid of Chaucer. I mean, you know, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. So they think that if you get rid of all these structures that uphold the white supremacist system, then you will get back to what it was before the white supremacist system had hegemony over everyone, and everyone can have their ways of knowing.
But how is that?
Yeah, I don't know. They miss a step or two there, but okay. So just
because it's still very vague. Like they keep.
Oh yeah.
Because first of all, they come at it from a historically inaccurate perspective, because the same science that started in different areas is what led to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, they took all of the old sciences and then built on it. That nothing came out of nowhere. It wasn't that those people had a way of knowing and then these other European white people suddenly like found it on their own, and then that became the way of knowing. But no, they took that and built on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, also, like, if you take a look at, I think it was David Deutsch, his book was Beginning of Infinity, and he talks about this. There were pockets of enlightenment throughout human history. Now, each one kind of built off the other and refined it, and, you know, maybe got a little bit better, took a couple of steps back, this and that, but they were all snuffed out.
Yeah.
And, I mean, okay, like, I'm looking for this right now. I'm trying to find it. Let's see if I can.
You can take something as like a Pythagorean theorem, for example, where it was, it was found, like Babylonians knew it, the Indians knew it. Yeah. So it's not like something that came out of nowhere.
Okay, but Pythagoras
didn't suddenly figure it out.
Okay, this is a quote from Plato, right? Okay. So, you know, we hold up Greeks as, you know, and I'm not saying anything, like, you know, and rightfully so, like, the Greeks contribute a lot. This is what Plato said: who is unable to count 1, 2, 3, or to distinguish odd and even numbers, or is unable to count at all, or reckon night and day, who is totally unacquainted with the revolution of the sun and the moon and the other stars, all free men, I conceive, should learn as much of these branches of knowledge as every child in Egypt is taught when he learns the alphabet. In that country, arithmetical games have been invented for the use of mere children, which they learn as pleasure and amusement. I have late in life heard with amazement of our ignorance in these matters. To me, we appear to be more like pigs than men, and I am quite ashamed not only of myself, but of all Greeks. So, I mean, he's praising the Egyptians for mathematics, right? And here are these assholes.
Yeah, because they had it.
Yeah. Well, okay, it's
the Indians had it. The Mayans had it. Everybody had it.
Yeah, and it's not like, you know, the Egyptians could have built the pyramids without math. Like, you need.
They're saying that math is different. Like when in the equitable math, they're saying the Mayans had base 20 instead of base 10, and okay.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, that's the same. There was that whole 2 + 2 = 5 bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay, that started off because someone said, okay, 2 + 2 can equal 11 in base 3. Right? And yes, 2 + 2 in base 3 does equal 11 because base 3 uses the numbers 0, 1, and 2. And so you have, you know, 0 1s, 0, you know, 1 1 or 2 1s, then you go to the 3s. So it's just like we have 0 1s up to 9 1s, then we go over to the 10s, right? That's all it is.
Yes.
And it's you know, like the way I explained it was the word pain in English means hurt or harm or, you know, ache. In French, pain means bread. It's the same goddamn letters. It just means something different, and that's where this came from. And so, if you take 2 + 2 in base 3 or 2 + 2 in base 10, you're performing the same function.
Yeah, the function does not change.
Yeah, so it's like they don't understand. and they play on your heartstrings, and then you'll have mathematicians going on, oh well, if you do this and it does actually work. It's like, yes, it works, but when you're in third grade or when you're in second grade and you're learning 2 + 2 = 4, you need to master 2 + 2 = 4 before you can get into modulus math.
Yes. You can get that later. You can get to different bases later.
Yeah.
Don't get to it. You're a child, and that's and there's. It's like, when you're learning logarithms, right? You know that most of the time if you're just using log, most of the time it's going to be base 10.
Yeah.
But you also learn after that you can put different bases, and according to the base, your answer is different. But when you learn, it seems to me that they want to confuse the child. You're not gonna fix the problem with math this way. You're going to confuse children even more. You're going to make them not like math, because now math is just like all the other classes. It's not just numbers. Now we have to listen. Now we have to answer in words. Now we have to, talk to people that don't want to. I mean, it's how is that not different than forcing kids in more discipline? It's kind of forcing children to be undisciplined.
Okay, let's say in your case, you're a chemical engineer. I mean, you studied this in Saudi, and did you study some here? Like, that gave you freedom.
But my engineering degree is here, yes.
Okay, but
my engineering degree is from the U.S. Okay, but I studied math, and I was good at math as a non-white person and a woman, and I really enjoyed it.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, that gave you freedom. That gave you,
it did.
That gave you an opportunity to come to the United States, and whatever. Like, I don't want to get into your whole story there, but I mean, you didn't have to go back to Saudi. You didn't have to live under that oppressive regime. Now, if you want,
and it's also, I think, for a lot of other people, I have met Nigerians that came to study engineering as well in the United States, or some different kind of geology, or some kind of science or STEM career. Indians also, a lot of them come here and try to stay, and of course there's a lot of Asians that come and try to stay as well. It's not because we're white adjacent or we're doing whiteness. It's just, and this is something that I've wanted to talk about a little bit. It's that one of the reasons in places like, let's say, where you have more freedom to choose, when you have more freedom of expression, when you don't have the poverty looming over your head. But and by poverty, I don't mean the kind of poverty that you have here in the U.S. And even though it can be found, but the kind of poverty that puts you at a position of, should I sell my children, in order so I can feed my other children, kind of poverty, like extreme poverty. The only way you can get out of that is through a career in STEM, because that is in places like that, that's the way you think. Like, if I go get an education, and if I can learn math, then I can go and use it somewhere, and I can apply it and get out of this poverty, and then hopefully get my family out of poverty as well. So these people, and a lot of them excel in it. Like, if you go to and you see it in places where it's just education, and maybe education is free for kids, and if they excel in a certain thing, they try their best to go towards a path that gets them to a STEM degree in order for them to get out of poverty. So you have a place like the United States, where there's freedom to choose, there's freedom of expression. So you don't see a lot of people going to, let's say, math and engineering, because they have other options. They can maybe, yes, it pays very little, it's not very good, you're still going to be under the poverty line, but you're still alive, and you're not starving. So you have that option. But when you in a different kind of, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's a lot of like this. You don't see racist mathematics in countries like, I don't know, Iran or Pakistan. You find it in places like here and maybe the Netherlands and France.
No, but also, I mean, like, I spoke to this guy. I think you can find him on Twitter as at Eric Electrons,
Mhm.
and smart guy. He's in fourth year of a physics degree, and where you want black people in STEM, whatever. Eric's a black guy, but he's like, I don't know if I want to continue in academia now because of all this bullshit. Like, he's being tokenized. He's being asked all the time. He's like, I don't agree with any of this politics. Yes, there's racism.
Why can't I just like physics?
Yeah. But so you're turning. I mean, here's a bright kid who wants to advance. He's, like I said, he seems smart. I don't know his work. I can't, but he seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders and everything. But you're disillusioning him. How many other people like that is that happening to? Like, let's say you were in STEM right now, and you were seeing all this stuff. Like, would you want to continue?
No, I'd be like, ew, no. I just want to. Can I just sit down and do what I like to do?
But I mean, okay. Again, that's the lowering of the grades and the condescension that just really pisses me off because I work in IT. I'm fine. I went as far as calculus 2. I never went further than that in math. But whatever. I need my math. Like, I needed my math. I need to know this stuff. But like in Australia, I don't know if I know it was one university for sure, but I don't know if it was a widespread thing where they reduced the entrance exams for women to get into engineering.
Okay, that.
This
is extremely offensive to me.
Yeah, but like, I don't want a job.
Are you already saying that I'm going to be less than my male counterparts, you fucking asshole? Is this Saudi Arabia?
No, but okay, but at the same time, when the military requires, someone to do 100 push-ups, let's just say, right, or chin-ups or whatever it is, they wanted a reduced number for women. And it's like, okay, but then they're saying the same thing. They're like, okay, obviously women physically, on average, the average woman physically is weaker than the average man.
Yes.
And so, yes, you can have a reduced level, but now they're saying, oh, you have to get rid of stuff like that. It's like, no, I can understand for the military, a woman requiring slightly less because, yes, it's not as stringent, but I don't think it should be.
Women's bodies are a lot different, and like especially when it comes to, let's say, push-ups, the majority of women store the fat and muscle in their lower body, whereas men do it in their upper body. So it's already like biologically different. But let's concentrate on this.
Yeah, no.
There is, if you look at, I have a study from 2005 in mathematically talented students expected to major in math and science, the specific fields to be expected in undergraduate college majors, percentage by sex. Like, let's say students that excel in math that go into different types, like engineering, math, biological sciences, computer science, medical science, etc. The difference, the only huge, or let's say like a big percentage difference is between people in engineering. When it comes to math, the difference is very small. When it comes to, actually, women are 21.1%, 15.9% for men. In medical sciences, more women go into that. In chemistry, more women get into that. So, the number is still, the percentages are not that different.
Okay, this is from AEI, so American Enterprise Institute, and this came out in the last couple of years. So for every 100 girls or women that do this, so take AP honors course, you get 54 men in arts or music. Earn an associate degree, 63 men. AP honors in foreign language or classics, 100 women, 64 men.
Yes.
Okay, same thing for English. Enrolled in graduate schools, only 73 men. 25 to 29-year-olds who have a master's degree, 100 women, 73 men. Who earn a bachelor's degree, 100 women, 74 men. Top of their high school class, it's 79. Honors in natural science, 79. Higher than a level of associate's degree is 80 men to 100 women. 25 to 29 years who have a first professional doctor's degree, 81. Honors in math is 82. So for every 100 women that take an honors in math, only 82 men. So, you know,
and here's the thing, like when it comes to the way they try to push people into going into STEM by saying that I need to see somebody there that represents me. I don't think that's, number one, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. You're not going to force somebody to like a subject if you put somebody that looks like them in that subject. But the other thing is that if you do not foster the love for the subject at a young age, when you don't discriminate against the person, you don't tell them like, oh, you won't be able to get this anyway because you're going to be bad at math, or you know, girls aren't good at math, this type of person is not going to be good at math. If you foster that type of thinking, that person is not going to go into it, no matter how many people they see that are, you know, engineers, mathematicians, you know, in technology, etc. But if you foster that love in them, that's when they go into it. Like and the other part that we need to also look at is that, again, when you have the freedom to choose, you are more, it's actually, and this is going to sound really, really bad, but having a lower number of women in STEM is not a sign of racism. It's a sign that you've actually reached freedom for and more freedom for women, because now women feel safe enough to choose other subjects to pursue. Where I'm from, for example, in the Middle East, women don't have a lot of choices. If they want to be able to break free economically, the only way they can do that is through STEM, is through going into college and, you know, getting math degrees and engineering degrees, science degrees, or going into technology. And you see that in places where, like in Algeria and North Africa, you have like 50% of women go into STEM. In Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, it's the same thing. Where you go to like Norway, where it's very well known to have really good, you know, equality between men and women and also you have the economic, you know, security. Less women go into STEM.
yeah, but that's just it. It's the choice now. Like I've been speaking to a couple of teachers and stuff like that, and I spoke to one woman recently, and it's just when you look at what's happening to boys, and it's, you know, they're doing worse overall now. And okay, there was a way, like, okay, education, everything had been geared towards boys for the longest time because, you know,
Yes.
fine, but they started correcting the problem, and now they're getting to the point of overcorrection where it's not like like teach people, like, maybe, okay, I'm not trying to talk about Saudi Arabia, but maybe like for, let's say, for a math class, if girls and boys at a younger age learn maths differently, maybe it's not a bad idea to have segregated maths class at a younger age so you can teach them to their skill set. I'm not talking about like a Saudi Arabia thing or whatever, right?
I know,
Like,
I know, I know.
But I mean, like when you're like again, I'm not an expert on this or whatever, but some of the studies and everything you look at, by the time you get around to about middle school or so, they start converging where it's, you know, like you can use the same kind of instruction. It's just, maybe it's just getting that base down. And it's the same thing, like girls who are better at math are also usually better at the verbal skills where boys are not. So,
Yeah.
you know, like so I'm just wondering, like, obviously I don't go ahead.
There's a lot. It's just that there's a lot to look at, and racism is not it, and sexism is not it either. You know, there has to be a different way of looking at education than just let's decolonize it, or let's dismantle sexism and racism in it. In an unfortunate way, like yes, the field of science has been extremely sexist and aggressive towards women, and it has been. Like if you look
Yeah.
at some of the medical journals in the past, they called us horrible stuff, and they were all medically wrong, biologically wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But we advanced and we got out of that, and now everything has to be hopefully fact based. But again, that is now white supremacist. But
yeah, but that's just it. Like you're taking away the tools that are going to help the people you say you want to help. And I mean, this is for, again, education is so important. Like, when people are like, "Oh, it's just in colleges," and it's like, yeah, but
no,
it's gotten out of college. Yeah, but
this hurts students. We're not going to get students that understand. Reading is important, and a lot of students aren't graduating with good reading abilities. They're horrible reading abilities. Their math is really bad. They don't know a lot of history. They don't know a lot. It's what are we teaching them? Just to be activists? But how is that going to help other than just put us in chaos?
Okay, but I mean, it's, again, this is not just the math curriculum, but like if you have things like, okay, I don't agree with some of these. I shouldn't say I don't agree. There's some of these laws that are coming out against, okay, they're targeting critical race theory, but they don't say it straight out, and it's the way they're worded is really good. Except for two of them have two lines that really scare me. Or the one line is that they can have a curriculum that says that the United States is an explicitly racist country. Blah 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 blah. Now I understand what they're trying to say, but I would have preferred if they'd used the language that the British Culture Ministry used in Parliament a little while back, and she said, "You cannot uncritically teach this. You cannot teach this as the only way to look at it." Like, I don't want some jingoistic, nationalistic curriculum being taught either.
No.
Okay, but you can talk about the good and the bad of the United States. You can talk about the good and the bad of any country, and you should. You should teach the history of your country, warts and all.
Yes.
And I mean, if you're talking about the United States, I've talked about this, or like, places like Canada, they were founded on a set of ideals, and the history of like the United States is them like very slowly realizing that they weren't.
Yes.
Up until about the end of the 1960s, and then they started pushing forward to try to cash in on that promissory note. Right? A lot of screw ups, a lot of mistakes, but I think the biggest one was at the end of the 90s when they went back to an identity-based politics for their policy, and that's when this stuff started getting like completely screwed up. It's
so what can we do?
Well, I mean, luckily there's things starting now in the States, and hopefully there's going to start coming in Canada. Okay, there's first of all in the States for parents is a thing called Fair for All, and it's I'll put the link in the description, but they are helping parents push back against this stuff in schools. I think they're also spearheading some legal action. So one of the cases they have right now is a woman in Nevada. Her child is a mixed race kid. I think he's 1/4 black.
I know.
Yeah. So like, Fair for All's helping her out. There's another thing called Counterweight, which is for if you want to push back from like diversity trainings at work and stuff, and also helping parents in schools. But they've got a lot of stuff. People are realizing. I mean, hopefully some more legislation comes out, and a lot of the legislation is being really well written. It's saying like, you cannot teach curriculum that stereotypes or scapegoats one race. You can't lay the blame of all the problems on people by the color of their skin or their sex. So this will stop like the critical race theory stuff. This will stop white nationalism. This will stop, it'll keep everything out. Like I said, I don't like that one line in a couple of the legislation where it says you cannot teach something that says that. It's like, you cannot teach it uncritically. Like that's,
I like that a lot better.
Yeah. But I mean, like, okay, that's also another thing. So you had the 1619 project. Now, in response to the 1619 project, there was a bunch of scholars that came out with this thing called 1776 Unites.
Oh, and then they called it like a Trump supported.
Okay, no. Trump unfortunately came out with his own. Trump came out with his own thing that said the 1776 Commission. So everyone now, I think a lot of people get the two confused, but 1776 Unites was, I think it was started by the Woodson Center, so it's Bob Woodson, and there's a whole bunch of black scholars like John McWhorter, that guy Ian Rowe I'd mentioned, Wilford Riley, I think Thomas Chatterton Williams, Glenn Lowry, all these people who are saying no. This is, forget 1619. Like, don't forget, like, you can talk about slavery, you can talk about all this stuff, but there's a better way of doing it. And they're trying to do like it was more of a pushback to 1619. And I think that kind of stuff needs to be done. Parents need to start going to PTA meetings. Like, a lot of this stuff is happening because the people who push this through, there's no one there to oppose them. So if parents start going to PTA meetings and school board meetings, you're going to find there's like 5 or 6 really loud vocal idiots who push this garbage. Show up with 10 parents that say, no, this is nonsense, and just have it stopped. It's like there's so much. It has to be done at the local level. I was saying at the last election in Canada, even the last election in the United States, like, you guys got to. I didn't think either of those idiots deserved to vote. I said I would have voted down ticket, and I would have voted for what really mattered. Like in California, Prop 16, which they wanted to. It was going to take out the language in the California Constitution where the government could not discriminate by race. So they wanted to bring affirmative action back, and it was mostly voted down by a lot of minorities. And so, but again, that was, the Asians are taking over the schools. Like, they were saying it straight out.
That's racist.
Yeah, I mean, okay, this one woman, she was on the school council, or like head of the school board association or whatever. I mean, she was saying, like, just this kind of stuff, like, white supremacy and all this, blah blah blah. And then someone found some tweet from her from a couple of years ago where she said, where she said, well, I don't know why Asians are supporting all this white supremacy, because if you're a house N-word, you're still going to be an N-word. And like, I mean, I'm like, come on. I mean, she's getting fired for it, but they're not firing her for her mentality. They're firing her for words, but her mentality is just as bad.
I mean, if she hadn't said that, then
if she hadn't said that, she'd still be there. And she's saying, we have to get rid of standardized testing, get rid of marking, get rid of grading, get rid of,
standardized testing. There are things that you can do in order to make them not as, because in standardized testing, it's not really testing your what you learn is it's more about your how to take tests when it comes to that.
But I mean, okay, there's
I've taken way too many. I've taken way too many standardized tests.
But yeah, same here. I mean, but there's the if a teacher gives you a quiz every week, or a big test every month or something like that, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. But like, again, from what I'm seeing is like some kids are getting a standardized test in every subject, once every couple of months, and that's way too much, because the teachers are teaching to the test, not to the subject. Whereas if you're reading Huck Finn or something, or you're doing a math class, the teacher can give you a quiz a week to see if you're keeping up with the work. And like a larger test.
Huckleberry Finn?
Some places are trying to, some places aren't. It just depends on where you go. It's that's the one thing. It's state by state. So the states that are getting rid of this, see how they do in a couple of years, and the states that aren't, again, they're going to blame it on white supremacy. It's always the answer. It's it's just like sin is always the answer. So it's, these people are crazy.
I still can't shake the feeling that this whole critical race theory is here to shake or to distract from something else that's happening.
Okay.
That's just my conspiracy theory, but like it's just so absurd that anyone would subscribe to it, especially people that are not white. Because it offends me. Okay,
critical race theory now again started off from critical legal scholarship, which was looking at the laws and looking at basically the people were dissatisfied and didn't think things were moving fast enough, especially so you had the Civil Rights Act, and you had in 65 the Voting Act, and in 68 was the last little bit of civil rights legislation. So this started in the early 70s, and it just wasn't good enough, and it wasn't fast enough. So I mean, I can understand the frustration. Like, it took 200 years for all that to happen.
Yeah.
And they were looking at the laws, and then from that you had other writers like Audre Lorde and Angela Davis. I was like from the Black feminist movement. Then you had intersectionality. It was around the time, like I said, the late 80s, early 90s, when Crenshaw merged postmodernism with critical race theory to make it. So it's like critical race theory, the way Crenshaw did it is engineering to mathematics. Mathematics is the theory, engineering is the application. Right? Like that. That's what it was. Okay. Another way I looked at it was, so you had Hassan al-Banna come up with the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brother. Okay. Yeah. Now, at the start, the Muslim Brotherhood was a small group. They weren't very large. They didn't have much power. They were being oppressed by the governments and all that. Syed Qutb goes to the United States, gets rejected by some girl at a dance or something stupid, comes back to the Middle East, starts an identity politics, like Pan-Arabism. Starts Pan-Arabism. Takes some of the, I mean, he learned some critical theory, I'm sure, in the US because he was there at the time. But he takes all this stuff and goes back. And I'm like, Crenshaw did to critical race theory what Qutb did to the Muslim Brotherhood.
He elevated them.
Yeah. But she also made it like she made it an application. She made it so you could apply it to society. Whereas in the legal scholarship, it was more of just, hypotheticals. And you could go at it from a legal standpoint. But yeah, like that's that. Like I'm looking at parallels with religion and stuff. And that whole thing, because I was looking at the reading up. You read up on Qutb and the Pan-Arabism, the identity politics, and I mean, then you read someone like Fanon who wrote about Algeria, and he wrote like some horrific stuff, like the retributive aspect of this. Like Antifa also does it. Is so Fanon, I think it was basically whoever is being oppressed, they have to oppress their oppressor for the same amount of time, otherwise they can never truly be free and liberated and all this other garbage. So I mean, Edward Said took the lot from Fanon as well. So I mean, I'm like this stuff has to be connected, and that's why they'll. Islam is the brown person's thing. So if you try to put Western values on it, you're colonizing. That's why Faisal al-Mutar, when he was at Rutgers, he was told he was the wrong kind of Arab.
I know. Yeah.
Was he? I don't actually. Was he at Rutgers or Syracuse? But anyway, yeah.
He was. Yeah, I do remember him saying that. You're the wrong kind of Arab. I get called by a lot of people that I'm just either spreading hate or that I just hate Muslims. Or that I'm just I worship white people and I worship whiteness. Like I don't.
No, but okay, but again, when they say that, right? Like, what are they calling whiteness? And that's you look at the stuff they're calling whiteness. Okay, there's a book, and these people wrote have been writing curricula for school for they've been doing pedagogy for school for 2 years. It's called Acting White.
It is extremely it's unbelievably racist.
Yep.
It's unbelievably racist to think that these characteristics are characteristics of white people. Yep. That people in other parts of the world can't be as civilized as you.
Yeah. No, but okay. The whole prologue of the book was talking about how the Obamas acted white and you shouldn't talk and act like the Obamas. And then the rest of the book was how not to act white. Now, I'm sorry, okay, let's take the time thing again in New York City, kids come in late, whatever. I joke about it in my family, when we're having a dinner party or something, it's like, oh, they're going to come on regular time or Desi time, because in India, you have a dinner.
An hour, 3 hours later.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time in India, if you have a meeting with someone, you show up to the meeting on time. If you're going to school, you show up to school on time.
Same thing in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Like I said, here you're getting a cable guy who says he's going to show up from 8 to noon. There in India, the guy said he'll show up on Friday between 8 to noon. And he'll show up on Sunday afternoon because it's cable and it's blah, blah, blah. There'll be all kinds of reasons and this and that. Or if you pass someone a bribe, it'll get done right away. There's all kinds of BS behind it. And then you had the race, you had actual real ass racists who would say, oh, black people are lazy, brown people are lazy, blah, 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 blah. Now you have these anti-racists saying, well, when, black and brown kids don't have their paperwork on time, that's just cultural. So don't penalize them for it. It's just saying the exact same thing, but it's racism coming at you from people with PhDs. So you accept it. It was bullshit.
Or it's racism that comes in a nicer way.
Yeah.
In a nice way. Don't be an asshole and call them lazy. Just say something else. Say it's just their culture.
Yep. It's the exact same thing. And No, I don't accept it. I don't accept it from
And I don't
anyone.
accept it. And the other thing that I don't accept is like they almost want us to go back to a segregated society where people just stay in their circles, where people don't mix, where people don't intermingle. They even look down upon interracial, couples, saying that, oh, this white man is fetishizing this,
What was it?
different white woman, or
Sex slave. They called her a sex slave. Oh, did you see that
oh my,
tweet the other
yeah,
day?
yeah.
Oh,
Bill Burr and Mia.
oh,
Yes, I sent it to my boyfriend and I said, like, so does that mean you owe me now?
but again, all this stuff, right? It's coming out of this thinking, and it's just okay. There was so 75. Okay, and this was for like I think this was in 2016. I'd have to go back and check the article. 75 colleges around, and it's not a lot when you look at the colleges around the United States, but 75 had segregated dorms in 2016.
Wait, segregated not by sex.
By color. Okay. BLM groups on college campuses pushed this forward. It happened. The KKK applauded it. There were
When the KKK applauds something that you just did.
okay,
Holy shit.
Okay, but like Columbia, no, but Columbia University this year is having 6 different segregated graduations. Now people are raising a stink about this, and they're like, "Oh, well, they're just optional." Harvard did that a couple of years ago. I think there was 16 universities 2 years ago that had a secondary graduation that was segregated, so only students of color. Like, it was like there was that young girl at the University of Virginia, and again, I don't blame her. She put the video out herself. She posted it. So a friend of hers videoed her telling a bunch of white kids in like an open space, a public space in the university, you all have to leave from here because you're making people of color feel unsafe. All the white kids out. She was taught that. That's what she was taught. Like, there's another idea that came out in 65 called repressive tolerance. And it was a paper by this guy, Herbert Marcuse. He's a critical theorist. Now, Marcuse goes as far as, like, you can basically take it as saying it's okay to repress something that harms, marginalized people, but he took it even one step further. It's like you have to repress conservatism. Conservatism leads to fascism, so you have to repress it. It's you cannot tolerate it. So that's where you get a lot of this stuff from. Like, you're teaching kids that they're being harmed. You're changing the definition of harm, and that got into the academy in like the mid 80s, and it got into colleges of education again. So when you look at the terms and services of Twitter or Facebook or whatever, we allow free speech except that which harms people. We don't want to harm someone, right?
Except they never really define what harm is.
But the harm is
you get people like Yasmin Muhammad get extremely like doxxed. That's okay. But people like Infinite Noodle, whenever she posts something, she gets her Twitter account.
Yeah, but it's also like, I don't know if I'm not sure if it happened to you, but I know it happened to Yasmin, where she took a screenshot of a rape threat that she got, and she got a suspension for putting the screenshot, but the guy who sent her the rape threat didn't. Now, there's a fucking problem here. It's a little ludicrous. I mean, but again, that's where this math stuff comes from. It's this idea that it's completely infantilizing. It's that I need special treatment because little brown children need to be looked after. It's like, screw you. I mean,
I want the same opportunity. I don't want you to tell me what I can and cannot do. You cannot do this to kids. They're making it. This is
but
somebody
also, like,
needs to fight this.
But
it has to.
Like, like I said, I'm hoping the lawsuits work. I don't want to see, like, I'd like to see one lawsuit go to the Supreme, like that one in Vegas. If that goes to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court says this is unconstitutional, great, that everyone has to stop it. Because you know what? I don't want to see school districts sued out of existence. There's already enough problem with education. You don't need that.
I know they don't have the money for it. Like, we need.
But at the same time, if your teachers are being taught this, what the hell is going to happen? Now, okay, like I'm going to take, like I was telling you about this the African thing, like in South Africa and whatever. China is investing in Africa, like owns Africa wholesale, right? And when the vaccine came out for COVID, like you looked at a map of the world, and I think all of Africa except for North Africa was being given the Chinese vaccine.
Damn.
Okay, China's doing all these investments, buying that place out. We're sending them this fucking backwards mentality and like way of thinking that's going to screw them up and keep them backwards. Like, I mean, honestly, like if post-colonialism and all that, like I was speaking to someone the other, like I was speaking to, I did like a live stream a couple of weeks back or maybe 3 weeks back. And one of the women, she's from Jordan. She was talking about like how post-colonialism is hurting, the Arab countries because like, oh, well, that's, you can't have that. That's white people stuff. That's colonialist, language. It's colonials talking. So you're talking about the Enlightenment, things like that.
I see it in my timeline because I try to stay in touch with a little bit of Saudi Twitter, and I see it there, and it's very strange. It's very foreign language. It's because it's translated into Arabic, but it still feels like a foreign language to me reading about it as I read about it in Arabic.
Yeah, but okay. Like look at Mona El-Tawi.
Yeah.
I mean, like
100% gone into it.
Yeah. And I mean, would you want a population of Saudi like that? Like, no, like I don't want a population like that of any place like that. Like, and it's the worst possible way to teach feminism or to teach, gender equality or to teach, acceptance of homosexuals. It's the worst possible way to deal with any of these things. I said this to someone just the other day, and like I've used this analogy a couple of times. It's like, okay, we want to, there's a problem with racism. We need to fix it. And it's like, oh, there's a problem with homelessness. We need to fix it. And some guy for the homelessness problem comes along and says, you know what? I'll fix it in 10 years and it's going to cost $100 million and lays out this great plan. And some other guy comes along and says, I'll do it in 1 year and it's going to cost you $5 million. And the second guy is telling you that he's going to do it by hiring mercenaries and going out shooting all the homeless people. That's what like the Kendi version of anti-racism sounds like to me. It's like, it's the equivalent of that homelessness plan, right? Like I'm not saying anyone's doing that, but you're not curing anything. You're just injecting more of it. Like what's her name? Crenshaw, when she, in her paper mapping the margins, that's kind of when she tied it really all together with a nice little neat bow. At the end of the paper, she says, we need to focus on a identity-based politics for people of color. We need to have an identity-based politics, blah, 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 blah. Like, no. To get away from racism, stop talking about race. Like it was, and that's another thing. Like, sorry, I'm just ranting here, but
no, you're good. This is something that goes through my mind almost every day.
Okay, the part of the scientific method and the Enlightenment and the reason and the logic and having that marketplace of ideas is you work out ideas, what's good and bad. Stupid idiots in the mid 1600s came up with the idea of race when they were trying to classify everything. And some people push them to classify it so they can justify slavery and all kinds of other stuff, right? Again, by the time the Civil Rights Act came along, or like when the British banned slavery in the 1800s, you're starting to look, that ethic was taking place, and they were going back and looking at the errors that they'd made. By injecting all this identity politics, by saying the colorblind ethic is wrong because it doesn't make you look at race. It's like, no, the colorblind ethic, all it says is don't put social significance on race. Obviously, if you look at someone, if someone looks at either of us, they're going to notice that we're brown. I mean, it's like, we're not like we're.
Yeah, I know. It's like they're almost it's like they're gonna force, for example, my boyfriend to look at me as nothing more than an immigrant, a white person, a person of color, and just continue to treat me differently because of, instead of treating me as an equal partner.
Yeah, it's just awful. Like I don't want. I mean, again,
and it's also making my employers my employers now have to look at me as, if I come in late, then that's just my culture. If I sit down and do nothing for 8 hours, that's just my culture. It's okay. They should just let it go. Like what? That's not true. It's. Yeah,
but it's also like, okay. Again, it's going to be hard to do because and I wouldn't want it, but what if there's so much of an overcorrection? It's like, you know what? Hiring a brown or a black person is going to be more trouble than it's worth because there's going to be more claims of racism, blah, 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 blah. Like, I remember like right after the Me Too thing, when it was like really at its height, when, you know, when there was a lot of like false claims and everyone like, you know, believe all women, it was like really at its height. And there was executives who were saying we might have to reconsider whether we want to hire more women. Now, that's a wrong attitude to take. But if by hiring a black or brown person, you're opening up yourself to some sort of lawsuit, because those are the stringent standards you're setting yourself up on. Like, you know, complimenting a brown or black person on how well they speak English is a microaggression, you know, like, and
also complimenting in general whenever they do something is microaggression.
Oh, by the way, I think it was Citibank, and I could be wrong with the bank. Maybe I am, but Deloitte in the United States said they want their employees to let the HR know about other employees who commit microaggressions. So you want your employees, I mean, like, you're setting up a tattletale system. Like Illinois set that up for the schools. They set up little places where the students can rat out their teachers for microaggressions. I mean,
sorry, my dog is being weird.
Yeah, that's fine. But I mean, like, you're from Saudi. Mm-hmm. You know, they want people to rat each other out. Like, okay, let's take another thing. So this coach, I think it was a high school coach, his father had said something racist in the 80s, and this was just last year. The guy and this came out, and because he wouldn't call his father out for saying something racist in the 80s, he got fired from his coaching position. That's like Masih Alijinad's brother being arrested in Iran because Masih speaks out against the Iranian regime.
Yes.
You know, that's, I mean, there was a guy who was going to get fired because his wife said something racist. I mean, I think this was in Canada. It was a Palestinian family, maybe it wasn't Palestinian, but it was a Middle Eastern family that, you know, came over, that emigrated to Canada, started up a falafel place. His daughter said something stupid on Twitter, and that his place was getting attacked, his business, because his daughter said something stupid.
This is exactly the mentality, the tribal mentality that I grew up in, that attack my family for things that I say. So
like, if you're in a classroom,
what I say is a reflection on them. It is not. It's a reflection on me.
But like, if you're a teacher and you're seeing this stuff, no one wants to be the first person to put their hand up and get called. Like, the first person that puts their hand up and says something, unless you go there in force, or unless you go there in number. Like, when I say force, I'm not talking about physical force. Like, unless you go there in a large number and you have a backing, the first person
you need the law to be on your side.
Yeah, but the law is on their side, but people are just acquiescing because, okay, again, I'll give some. It's not like I agree with Crenshaw, or D'Angelo, or at least, but being racist has been made such a bad thing that people are so afraid to be called racist. Like, you know, when you're not racist and someone calls you a racist, just tell them to fuck off. It's as simple as that. Like, I mean, okay, the San Bernardino shootings, their neighbor said, I saw something suspicious, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to sound racist. Like the grooming gangs in England.
Yeah.
You know, people didn't say anything, and little girls got raped because they didn't want to be racist. Like, okay, the military, the U.S. military in 2015 in Afghanistan, U.S. Army captain walks in on an Afghan military commander. So this is the Afghan military that's working with NATO, like our allies. He's sodomizing a little kid, so the Butcha Buzzy. The captain put a stop to it. The captain got reprimanded because it's culturally insensitive.
There's a child being raped.
Exactly. So
that is across the board wrong.
Well, no, because, you know, Pakistan, you can marry when you're 16. In Iran, it was 9 years old because the prophet married at 9. Right? It's how can you be culturally insensitive? That's their culture. Like,
I was trying to find a tweet, but I couldn't find it. It was actually it's very similar to what you're just talking about. It was a response to Jimmy Bangash's article on Islamic homophobia, and she said, "Well, it's unfair to put, the left in this huge dilemma between, supporting Muslims
Oh, I
and
saw that.
there's really not a huge dilemma here.
No, it's not. It's okay. Like I said, they can't see the victims for the brown people. As soon as they see brown people, it's like, oh my god, victim, and then that's it. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's like, again, it's the way it's being taught. They're not being taught history. They're not being taught. They're being sold that the Enlightenment was a bad thing because of this, and this. Yes, bad things happen because of science. All kinds of bad things.
Yes, ethics and science are like, in order to advance, it's an unfortunate thing, but ethics is kind of like a barrier for science because it is. But we need it in order for horrible things not to happen.
And again, like, if the people, if the quote unquote scientists in the 1650s or the 1640s, when they were coming up with the classifications, if they knew about genetics and they had microscopes, I don't think they would have made the same errors. Like if Ptolemy had Galileo's telescope, he wouldn't have come up with epicycles. Like it's that simple.
Yeah, exactly. And if we were able to do autopsies or to be able to do surgeries back, the 7th century, then we would probably know that semen does not come in between your backside and your ribs. It's like it's something as simple as that. It's because it's unbelievable how people actually let this infect our education system. And at first it started out, it's not helping. It's only going to create bigger gaps in education. It's not going to help kids get through math and science. It's not helpful at all. And it's also not, like, as a woman in reproductive years, I mean, I still hope I have some left. If I were to want to have a child, do I really want to send them to a school like this?
Oh, yeah, and like that's just it. Like, and like
I want my child to be able to get an education, the same education that I was able to get, if not better. But all I'm seeing is that it's going backwards.
But it's at the same point too. Like, okay, this is not the, like, especially in Canada now. It's a big worry is the gender education, because Canada's passing Bill C6, which is anti-conversion therapy, and most people, when they hear that, they think it's okay putting the electrodes on gay people's heads and whatever. But it doesn't allow you to speak about gender and sex. So if a kid says I'm X, then you have to support it. And like, kids can be transitioned at school without the parents knowing. And like you've got kids in Ontario now who's, at home they're Joseph, at school they're Josephine, or vice versa, and the parents don't know. Like that's so. I don't know if you read Abigail Schreier's book. I forget what it's called. It's like transgender trouble or something like that. Like, it's about the harms it's doing to girls, especially autistic girls. But let's say you're using the intersectionality and everything. You're telling girls that they're going to be held down, that they're they're going to be oppressed, blah 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 blah. And like, because that stuff's starting at the same time as they're starting to talk about gender. Now, if you tell them that they can transition and become a boy, and at the same time you're telling them that they'll be oppressed as a girl.
Yeah.
Like, it might be okay. And like, okay, like I said, getting a little far afield.
No, because I understand it completely. I come from a country that actually, oppresses girls. And growing up, all I wanted to do was be a boy, because if I were a boy, I wouldn't be oppressed. I could go out and run. I could do whatever I want. I could not wear hijab. I could, just be more successful. But if I'm a girl, then I have to subscribe to all of these other things.
But also, like we were saying with the racism, oh, math isn't for black people, this and that. Like, with keeping the girls down, and with the transgenderism stuff, it's the same kind of thing. Like, you're not setting them up to succeed. You're telling them
that you're already going to be oppressed.
And it's not a good way to raise kids. Like, again, I worry about this because, like, when I was growing up in Canada, and in the mid '80s and the late '80s, especially, like, you see it all coming from the States. You had the Bloods and the Crips. You had a lot of white supremacist reaction to that. And it was all drug and gang related. But you're talking with the gang, the people who work with the gangs, and, like, de-radicalize. Like, now you talk about de-radicalizing people and stuff like that. Back then, it was just, I can't remember what the term they used. But, like, ISIS goes after people who are disenfranchised, who feel weak, who feel set upon, who are like, oh, I'm oppressed. You're teaching this to kids that they're oppressed, or they're either oppressed or the oppressor. There was a school in New York City called the Fieldstone Academy, and in 2015 they split up their kids for 1 hour a week by race. They sent letters home to the parents so the parents can decide what race their kids are.
That's
and
really
so 45 minutes a week, every week, they split the kids up by race. They told all the white kids that you are oppressors, you've oppressed everyone, this is how you've done it. For every other race, they told the kids that these are the advancements your race has made, but you have been oppressed by the white kids. Within a few weeks, and this was K through 8, some of the kindergarten students started sounding like white supremacists, because you're getting people to focus on their goddamn race, and you're telling them that they're evil. What do you think they're gonna do? Like, like the Charlottesville thing. People are like, oh my God, white supremacy is growing. But it's like, you had intersectionality in high school since 2010. You're getting people to focus on their race, and you're surprised why white supremacy is rising. Like, give your heads a shake. What else do you think is going to happen? Like, it's
such a very difficult. It's an actual problem. It needs to be. More people need to know about it. More people need to fight it. This is not okay. Education is, just like you said, parents definitely need to go to teacher parent. They need to do PTAs. One of the things I'm hoping to do, because if I'm going to have kids, I don't want them to go through this kind of school system, is I'm going to try to go on a school board. It's something that I think you said it. You were one of the first people to tell me about it, and it got me thinking. And honestly, this should not be taught at all.
No, and okay, and I feel the same way about this stuff as I feel about religion. Now, I don't want an Islamic-based curriculum. I don't want a fundamentalist Christian. I don't want a Christian-based religion curriculum. You can talk about this to high school kids. Like, I don't think it's age appropriate for, like, primary school kids, but high school kids, if you're talking about philosophy and you're talking about some of this stuff, this is one of the ways that was talked about it. And
yes.
And just the same way you can teach religion, you can teach Islam without indoctrinating kids. This is what Islam is. Like, you can talk about it, and you don't have to go to either extreme where it's, oh, they're all savages or whatever. Like, you don't have to do any of that. You can teach Christianity. And this stuff, again, should be taught, but, like, should you base policy on it? Like, it's the same thing in universities. If a university wants to teach critical race theory, I don't think the government should step in and stop it.
No.
But critical race theory, if it wants to make, or intersectionality wants to make policy, it has to stand up to the same scrutiny as everyone else. But that's why they want to get rid of that scrutiny. That's why they're saying that scrutiny is white supremacy, because it fails to meet up to those tests. So, or fails to meet up to the standards. So, I mean, like, they'll even say, like, if you show them a study that disproves one of their statements, their answer is, well, that the way the study was made was white supremacist. So you could only get those answers.
Yeah, I have heard that. It's almost like they're shutting. It's very similar to how Islam also shuts down all kinds of criticisms against it. Or like my favorite, this has been refuted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's a dogma, right? Islam's a dogma. Communism was a dogma. Yeah, and it's most dogmas. It's, if something goes wrong, it was always an external fault. As much as they talk about ijtihad, they don't want to look at themselves. Like, it's always someone else's fault. Look, we're coming up on almost a couple hours. Guess I should.
Where is my dog? Okay, I found him.
Yeah, I guess we should.
He was crying. Did you see him when he was crying back in the background? He was just like looking at the door.
Yeah. I think we should start wrapping this up. So if you got any last words you want to say about STEM and all this racism bullshit, go ahead.
Is that my only thing is that there is, when it comes to math, math is universal, just like I said, just like you said, across all cultures, across all languages. It's one of the few topics that it doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter what you believe in, it's gonna be there. And trying to dismantle racism, and it should, just like you said, if you want to teach it, it's a philosophy. It's not going to be in the same category as trying to teach K through what, 5, 6, 7, or 8. It's not sustainable. It's not going to help. In order to fix the education system, you need to actually fix how you are teaching these children, and not base it on color or even sex. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, anyways, thanks a lot for coming on and talking. It was fun. Thanks everyone for listening.